Welcome, everybody, to our latest edition of After Hours. Today, we've got a great roundtable across the globe. So we've got a nice group of people here to talk about a fun subject, which is unpopular watch opinions. Now, mostly on the internet and most of our shows, we talk about the mainstream popular watches, popular opinions. Today, we're going to turn it a little upside down and talk about what all of us feel are unpopular watch opinions. We're going to get the company out of trouble and say that none of these opinions are official WatchBox opinions. These are all our personal opinions. While we may take individual credit for them, please don't hold it against the company. These are just our own personal thoughts, prayers. We've got certainly over 100 years of experience on this panel, so a lot of old timers and some of the new kids as well. So we'll have a great range of opinions that we can talk about. So I guess I'm going to get us started off. Again, I'm one of the old guys. Me and Patrik are going to bookend. Thank you. The old guys. Patrik joining us from Switzerland. And I'm going to start with one of my least favorite watches, which is the Aquanaut. I'm a huge Patek Philippe fan. Growing up, my dad was a watchmaker. All he talked about was how nothing was better than Patek Philippe, and it was handmade, and it was iconic and quality and everything there was. And then to me, they came out with an Aquanaut. Now, the sport watch family started with the Nautilus and is amazing, and Genta design and history and everything there was about it. And I just always felt like the Aquanaut just missed for a lot of reasons. One is I never liked the shape. There's my popular friend Brian wearing his Aquanaut. So Brian, how does that watch fit you today?
Unbelievably well. So I've always been a fan of the Aquanaut. It looks
a little loose.
Yeah, I've lost a little bit of weight, so I need to cut the strap.
You lost a little bit of weight. You look fabulous during COVID period. Getting in shape, looks fantastic. So now his Aquanaut's a little loose. And to adjust the Aquanaut, you actually get out a fancy tool, which is called a pair of scissors.
Exactly.
And you cut a little piece off.
I actually have
now, I don't know, maybe I'm just an old school get off my lawn guy. But I really would like to have a more, fancy, complicated way to adjust a watch than cutting a little piece off. And anybody who's ever sold Pateks knows that worst feeling is in the world when you're adjusting one for a new client and you cut one too many.
But that's not unique.
Knock on wood.
Most rubber straps are cut.
Well, no. Rolex now has developed a fantastic system that has adjustable sides and an adjustment in the clasp mechanism on the new elastic.
Irritating.
Yeah, I think that's a very complicated system, just because you always have to have the right strap or the right combination of lengths.
Or once you get it fit,
sizes. So
once you get it fit, it's amazing, and you can adjust it on the fly. That was always my thing, not having a micro adjustment. I think even if you did cut it, if you had a micro adjustment like some of the Breguets have and some of the other pieces have, it should have a more advanced strap system. That's my unpopular opinion. Obviously, as all the rest of you love the Aquanauts.
Yeah, I will give my quick highlight for me. It represents a watch that is extremely transitional. You can dress it up, you can dress it down. I think that there are not that many sport watches that fall into that category. Rolex, I would say, is one of them, where you can really just wear the watch all the time. And if you only had to have one watch, it could be that. And it's one of the areas where I think the AP offshore actually does miss the boat, is that the watch is just a little bit too big and a little bit too thick in order to be that transitional. It moves too far into the sport category. And I think that the Aquanaut is just that perfect combination of both.
I honestly have to say, I think it's a bare minimum sports watch. It's right on the cusp to me, in all honesty, of not really being a sports watch. And that's because it is a little bit on the thin side. I kind of disagree. I don't think that it can be dressy, in all honesty.
You could wear a black rubber strap, black dial.
You're not wearing a suit with a black rubber strap watch.
Exactly.
I think it would look great with like a tux. I feel like that would be a super cool look.
Mike just doesn't have the dexterity to cut a rubber strap.
That's right. These fat fingers, it doesn't work that well. But no, I mean, to me, iconic Patek is a more elegant and to me, a sport watch. I've had so many guys wear the Aquanaut, and one, it picks up scratches really fast because of that big flat bezel. So if you really do wear it as a sport watch, it does get shows a lot of wear pretty quickly. And it's not as durable as any kind of a Rolex. I mean, I'm rugged and I beat stuff up, and I would destroy an Aquanaut in minutes if I was wearing it as a daily driver.
I'm exceedingly careful with my watches.
You are perhaps the absolute worst with your watches. Your 5980 looks like it was worn by a knight of the Round Table with his suit of armor.
I love that. All right, so that was my unpopular opinion. We're going to roll over, since Brian obviously is the opposite of me. Let it rip, Brian.
So I obviously have opinions on everything, but I would say that, and I'm generally right.
Boy, do you.
I think I'll start off slow by saying one of my unpopular opinions is I am a much bigger fan of tang buckles than I am deployant buckles. I think they fit better. For me, aesthetically, they look better. And I just, I love the way they look and feel. And I just think that the deployant buckle movement sort of came about, watch brands looking for a way to, Patrik, you can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe charge more or add more value. But for me, I'm just, tang buckle all the way.
Well, I think the main reason that they came with the deployment buckle is not to make it more wearable. It's more to protect the strap. But I'm of the same opinion. I mean, today, for example, I'm wearing a very normal, very straightforward tang buckle. I have the same opinion. But of course, it wears and tears more on the strap. I think that was the main reason why it was introduced. But it's much more comfortable to wear a tang buckle, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting transitions that I thought really, I shouldn't say cemented it for me because I always felt this way, but was when back to AP moved their diver and their offshore to tang buckles. I think that was when finally, they're admitting that it fits better on the wrist.
Well, in fairness, regarding AP, in my opinion, their deployant buckles are backwards and
they're totally
uncomfortable in the industry.
100%
among the most
backwards.
Uncomfortable in the industry. I agree with you though, Brian. I think the deployant is, I think it's more to balance out a precious metal watch, in all honesty. And again, to what Patrik said, the protection of the strap. But having that extra heft on the bottom end of a precious metal watch definitely does balance it out. I think it makes it uncomfortable personally.
Mm-hmm.
The only ones I do like it on is Rolex sports watches, because they are so heavy like that. I couldn't imagine having a Sky Dweller on a tang. You need it on some of those beefier buckles.
There's some brands that do it better than others, and I think there's buckles that sit better on the wrist. And I do believe that based on the weight of the watch, sometimes you do need the balance of the deployment, sort of to keep your wrist balanced. From a comfort standpoint, definitely a tang is more comfortable, especially if you have a smaller wrist, but there are some brands that do it well and some that don't.
Yeah. And that's not to mention too, like a perfect example of that balance, I think, would be a Zeitwerk, actually. You kind of need that extra heft on the bottom of the strap to balance it out. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into deployance. If maybe you have an allergy to one of the alloys in the metals to where, you'd have to switch out the deployant for a tang. So there's kind of a lot of reasons to have a tang, in my opinion.
So Brian, that wasn't terribly unpopular. You got to come up with another.
I'm moving. I said I'm going slow. I'm going slow.
What do you got for us that's unpopular? Come on.
So I abhor GMT hands-on watches. I think it clutters the dial.
You mean like that?
I think, exactly like that. Like it clutters the dial. I just can't stand it. I've never liked them.
Well, that's because you don't know how to read time in 24 hours.
I think I don't know how to read the time or set them. And I think that it's a combination of both.
Or you don't travel anywhere.
That is true. No, I do go
out. Leave the Philadelphia time zone. As a result of not liking GMT hands, I've become a big fan of watches that show that have a GMT function, but represent it as like a 12-hour GMT, particularly the Aquanaut 5164. I absolutely love, just because, it's super easy to use. You can set the watch that the bulk of the time just looks like you're telling your standard time in your own time zone. You've got the date there. And then when you want to travel, you move the hand out from underneath the other one, and it just, works perfectly.
That is a solid aesthetic. I have to give you that. I do like the 5164, the functionality a lot. I mean, the thing that's a little strange with that is the home and local time, but I like the way that they display the AM PM a lot, actually. It's very, very user-friendly, so to speak.
I, of course, love GMTs. My all-time favorite watch is Rolex GMT, the most classic one there is. Love the touch of color. Couldn't be happier with the third GMT here. And I think they're kind of successful with that.
What's your GMT hand set to right now? I just want to know.
It is set to 24-hour time, of course, because I'm not traveling. But as soon as I land, when I travel, and I do travel a lot, I set to my main hand and keep it local. What? I used to travel a lot. Yes, thanks for reminding me.
We'll find somewhere new to send you. Don't worry.
Where do you come on this, Patrik? Come on, you're the Swiss guy.
Well, I like what Brian said, you know, because it goes in. I have a more general approach. I like simplicity, you know. So when I hear Brian about the tang buckle, yes, I agree. That goes into simplicity, and I think the hand makes it complicated to read the GMT. I agree. I come from a brand. We had a window. We had a big window with the second time zone. I like that actually. It was much easier to read. So generally, what I think, what I don't like is timepieces where you cannot read the time or whatever function, because at the end of time, the timepiece is here to tell you the time. And I see some perpetual calendars. It can be a Vacheron, it can be a blanc bar with a chronograph, and the hell you cannot read. You cannot read the time. And I once had a boss. He said, "You know what? The young guys, they might be able to read it, but they cannot afford the timepiece, you know. But the old guys, they cannot read it anymore. We were talking about the old folks here. We need readability." And what I believe in strongly is a complication has to be useful for the end user. Otherwise, it's just making a complication complicated for the sake of it. I don't see the purpose. I don't see
that might qualify as your unpopular opinion, because obviously the last certainly 10 or 20 years, every brand has made these wildly complicated, you can't read it, you know, can we stuff 10 complications in a watch that no one's ever going to use function?
I am for complication for complication's sake. I do like when brands do that, actually.
I'm with Patrik. I'm still on the you know, simple and effective, and you know, it should work actually.
But you know, it changed. Huh? I think what you said, that they packed the pieces would make them much more complicated than they used to be. I think it changed a bit. It became a bit more simple in general. Now, if there is a brand out there that wants to make a statement and produce a few pieces to make them really complicated, why not? Because that's craftsmanship, you know. But when it goes into more mass, if it's really, really complicated, you have more problems with it. 100% sure. I mean, the best example is Rolex, you know. And I just like the simplicity. I mean, the piece I have today cannot be more simple. Aesthetically, whatever. It's from the master who really knows simplicity. That's Ludwig Oxen. Yeah.
So cool.
What is it?
Oxen Jr.
It's Oxen Jr. And the coolest about it is actually that my son produced it. So he put it together. That's even the coolest part about it.
That's awesome.
I think it is, you know, in this day and age, that there is something to be said for complications for complication's sake, and the ability kind of to go back into the core of brands and the craftsmanship and really do something great, and kind of like a concept watch idea. But I'm with you, the kind of mass production of them, when you can't read them and they're not easy to set, and they, you know, there's an art to manufacturing, and it is pretty crazy what people can accomplish. So the act of doing it is interesting, but not so much for mass production. I'm with you on that.
I think what you're saying is you have to push sometimes the craftsman to the limit. It's like when they produce a Formula One racing car, they go to the limit. But then when you produce a mass production car, you use the knowledge, but it's not that complicated anymore. It's exactly that.
All right, Armand, we're going to jump over to you now.
Oh, man.
Saving Alaina for the last.
I can't wait. So, you know, I want to preface this with saying this is an extremely unpopular opinion, I think, and I have.
That's why we're here.
I have owned one, and I did love it during the time that I did. So I think the Omega Speedmaster Professional is totally overhyped. I think it's it's a fantastic watch, but my gosh, the surrounding interest in that watch, I want to use a different phrase, but the surrounding interest in that watch, it just drives me crazy to no end. And mainly because it's not the best version of the watch, not by far, in my opinion. During that period of Omega, there were, and rather the 20 years following, I guess we'll kind of put a pin in the moon landing, the 60s.
Right.
There were so many Speedmasters produced, so many various versions, your Mark IIs, your Mark IIIs, and I just think there's just so much more Speedmaster that you can achieve for the same money than the Speedmaster Professional. And I just think, it's something that has become part of watch culture, in the sense of people think that a collection's incomplete without a Speedmaster.
A lot of people believe that. I mean, it's kind of the same thing on a Rolex sub, but I would argue that like they've made subs since the 50s, and but everybody needs some version of a sub.
Yeah.
You don't think we need,
and that's the thing. There are
a first
awesome
watch on the
versions.
moon? Come on, it's awesome. Love that.
There's awesome versions of it. And I did have one, but it was just, I don't know what it is. It just got to me after a while.
Well, you have to realize I grew up, my dad was a watchmaker, and we were an Omega dealer back in the 70s. So that's kind of how I grew up, was with those, original Speedies and, the really crazy Omegas of the 70s I thought were fantastic. And there were so many great ones. So I would agree with you. It's gotten over-popularized and overdone because every year they come up with 20 different variations. And there are so many cool ones they could bring back.
That's the thing too. Not to, I don't want to beat a dead
That's
horse.
That's all things. Anything that becomes iconic, that's been around for a long period of time, that hits a sweet spot amongst collectors, it's bound to happen. The product life cycle for these brands is year in and year out. It's not like a car where they can make a model and it lasts 10 years. So when you have some, whether it's
what about Rolex?
Exactly. What about the sub?
Sub hasn't been touched in 20 years.
They've tweaked it over the years, though. I mean, again, like they've made minor nuance changes.
The sub's been in production now for almost I guess 10 years at this point. The same sub, the ceramic sub.
But you can get a Hesley Crystal first Omega in space, and it's again, it's still
first Omega in
a
space
great
has
watch.
the sapphire on it, actually, but
Does it not have the Hesley?
No.
I thought it
I
does.
wouldn't argue Omega with Armand, but that's just me.
No, yeah, it's true.
Oh,
but no, I mean,
I think it's an iconic reference that they have made a lot of editions of, but it's no different than AP with the offshore, the Royal Oak, or any other brand where they're
making. You love beating up AP right now.
No, I think to Armand's point though, Omega is so prolific, and I mean it's a huge brand. So I think that's also the part of it. I mean, if AP compared to Omega volume wise, I mean, it's a whole different world.
Yeah.
I look at it more as a Rolex equivalent because, they're making mass quantities of these pieces. So I understand, but they also have a mass history. And I think they could explore some of that other history. That would be awesome.
The Speedmaster's at the sort of core of the brand, and it is, like Brian said, it's kind of their bread and butter, one of their best sellers. So you take it out of the line, and I think the brand loses a lot, and it's at the core of the brand. You produce it for too long and you have too many of them, and it gets overhyped, and it doesn't.
It's a tough balance, no question.
Yeah, it's really, really tough. I do think something that Omega does really well in the Speedmaster line is that they've experimented with a lot of different materials. They've brought out a lot of different variations of it. They do limited editions, in my opinion, pretty well. Perhaps it would be good to stop production for a little while and bring it back later, like Rolex does with,
correct,
the GMTs and whatnot, and get the hype back up there. But it's almost like, how does a brand like that cut out their bread and butter core piece, the thing that everybody wants?
Yeah, I can see what you mean by that. And I think the answer is, you don't have to have one model that goes through for 50 years. You just don't have to do it. Yes, we think of these iconic pieces as
Rolex cutting out the Daytona now because they've been producing it for a long time, or cutting out the sub because they've been producing it for a long time. But you would never think that they would do that. because it's part of the brand.
I just view the Speedmaster in a slightly different regard because of the amount of versions that there are. Yes, there were a lot of Daytonas. Yes, there were a lot of subs, but there were 10-fold, 20-fold the amount of Speedmasters, the amount of Speedmaster SKUs produced. And I just think overall, if they shrunk the Speedmaster, yes, maybe definitely keep a classic Speedmaster in the line, but really focus on some of those weird peripheral ones.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's so much good Omega to go with.
I mean, there better be an orange side of the moon this year, okay? I'm letting you know. Orange surrounding the pin.
There better be a what?
An orange side of the moon this year.
Yeah, right.
We haven't hit that color yet, exactly.
No, it's the red side of Mars.
Red side of Mars. All right, Alaina, we're up with you.
All right, so my unpopular opinion is pretty basic, but I like smaller ladies' watches. I think over the years, we've seen case sizes move up for men. We've seen them for women as well. And we see, a lot of women wearing watches that were intended for men, Submariners, Daytonas. But I think there's something to be said, and there's something really classic about wearing smaller size watches. I think there's some amazing cool vintage Cartiers, even, smaller Datejusts for ladies when they're stacked with different bracelets. I like it. And I particularly like it when it comes down to dress watches. Some of, the dressy Breguets, the La Flame, I like them.
I love the La Femme. I love that watch. Diamonds down the bracelet. You have to have it. It's an amazing. The best part is I think one of the coolest experiences I ever had was at Patrik, was watching them make that bracelet. And they literally hand weave the gold into it, and then they have this huge press, and they basically smash it. And that's how it flattens it, and it's incredible. And the jewelry work on those, I love those. And I also love like the early Jaegers with the 101 movements. We had a couple of diamond pieces last year that
smallest movements ever
are spectacular. Love that stuff. Yeah. And the Cartier Diablo,
like
another little mini one. I love
a lot of it out there, but you can get good buys on stuff. You can find some really interesting, unique pieces. And I don't know, I love it. I think it's
I have to say, I envy female collectors a lot, because you can get some of these really, really cool vintage pieces with, really strong brand, brand provenance and brands. Yeah, I mean, it's just this very particular aesthetic that engulfs a time period that just happens to be like 80 years. And it's so classic to me. I completely agree. I love a small ladies watch.
No, totally underappreciated. I love that one, because again, you're right, though. You can steal them right now. I mean, there's some of the stuff that I go and I go to the shows, and nobody even asks prices on some of that stuff. Outside of the Japanese market, I mean, they really don't have a big market here in the States, which I love. Guys, that was awesome. We'll do it again.
Have a good one.